First and foremost, because as many of you may have just realized, unless of course you're in premium YouTube subscription, you might have had to just sit through an ad, which means we've checked all the boxes that we need to check to get over one huge hurdle, which is to monetize. I know that might not be as exciting for the viewers because now there might be ads and stuff, but it's a big deal for us and for me specifically because this has been my project to work on, and I've been putting a lot of time in research, execution, all of this kind of stuff, and it's nice to kind of have passed one of these mile markers. So, hey, here we are, and I also needed to burn about 30 seconds because when you're monetized, you're not allowed to say swear words within the first 30 seconds, but we're probably past that now. And I have a few bitch ass rage quitters to report to the public
Bitch ass rage quitters
of the week. As I think
right.
you do as well too, right?
I mean, I think I ran into one of the ones that you had before, yeah, there was another one too.
Oh, did you run into Flying Schlong from 2 weeks
I
ago?
ran into Flying Schlong. I blacklisted him too. Right afterwards, I'm like, you know what? This is enough. So
Did he
so
rage
there we
quit on
go.
you?
So, he did not rage quit on me.
All right.
This time. So
Fair
so.
enough. But residual shame to Flying Schlong. The
His
last
connection
time.
also was balls, but we're gonna talk about that later on.
Well, yeah,
But yeah.
and by the way, if in my I have a policy on that. If your connection is bad and it sucks, and or the other person's connection is bad, well, first of all, you're playing online. Finish the game and don't rematch them. Big difference between that and just straight up rage quitting, especially when only it's at the point where you're losing. But this week, I ran into two different rage quitters and got rage quit on a total of 3 times. The first of which was a Balrog player by the name of Master NSX. What a bitch ass rage quitter he was. And then actually, he wasn't the first one, he was the second one. The first and third one was a guy or girl named BBW Messiah, an Abigail player. Now, I started my set, this was yesterday. I started the set for the day, and it was like the first or second match. I ran into this guy's a Grandmaster Abigail player. And I mean, it wasn't the smoothest, but we were definitely playing. We were committed. We were manifesting on screen almost all of what we wanted to do. And sure enough, rage quit happens, and I think it was in the second game. Well, I jotted it down, and then the very last set of the session that I was playing there, he pops up again, and I was like, "Oh, I'm recording this on OBS because if they rage quit out, or if someone rage quits, you don't get the replay. It doesn't go to CFN. But if you record locally." You got it. And then so I did that.
Yep.
And sure enough, we got ourselves another rage quit, and you'll be able to see it live. Well, not live. You'll be able to see the footage here. And shame to you, BBW Messiah. Be better. Grandmaster players, man, you'd think you kind of grow out of this kind of stuff once you get into the groove of things, and once you have played enough matches and you've figured out how Street Fighter works. But no, still rage quitting even at the Grandmaster
Yeah.
level.
Yeah, you lose a bunch of points too. Like, because I've had my connection drop out a few times. It was my connection dropping out. I didn't rage quit. But anyway, but yeah, you lose like a ton of points when it happens, and it's just like, ugh. So it's not even worth rage quitting. Like, it really hurts you. But I haven't I don't often rage quit, so I don't know if maybe at diamond rank, like you only lose 35 points or some crap like that, some weird thing Capcom did. But the times my connection's bombed out, it's like been like, ugh, like that's like awful. Don't do it. So,
Yeah.
but. For some people, and we're going to talk about this later on, some people points are kind of come and go type of thing.
I don't know,
where they're like, yeah, So
They
yeah.
certainly don't care about their own character and their own, the perception that everybody else has of them. So, anyways, that was this week's bitch ass rage quitters of the week.
bitch ass rage quitters
Of the week. I like that segment. That's a lot of fun for me. Okay, so jumping right into it here. The first segment I want to get into is the worst DLC characters of Street Fighter V. Now, we have more DLC characters now than we do original roster members. There's only 16 of those, and I think we're up to what, like 26 DLC? And there's a couple of ways of approaching this. Like, what do you mean by worst? Do you mean worst on the tier list? Do you mean something else completely? I widely mean something else completely. although it does factor in how strong a character is. I think that's a huge part of this discussion. I don't think you can divorce it from the discussion. But mainly this is in the modern times, DLC is a common thing across almost every game and is almost every genre. It's something that has become just the routine. And as far as I can tell, a successful DLC content bundle, edition, whatever, is something that gets people to continue to play your game if you're already playing it, or if they're already playing it, and it's something that gets new people to potentially jump in if they're not already playing it. And so when I look at fighting games, it's pretty plain to see what a DLC character would be and what you would hope that they would be in those terms. And so I look at a lot of these characters, and basically what I've boiled it down to is how much of a splash did they make when they were first revealed, and then how much do people play them and return to playing them after they're out. And because that's the way we're sort of doing this, I see Rose and I see Dan, the two most recent ones, and I don't know that I have as much enough data. The experiment's kind of still in progress with those, so I really don't have them on the table. We can talk about them, especially if you have anything to say. I know you're a Rose player, so you might have 2 cents about her, but I kind of put them off the table for this because, like I say, the experiment's still sort of in process for them.
Yeah, it's pretty darn fair.
Yeah. And I think the biggest, if you wanted to say someone was a failure or there was a failed DLC attempt here, it would have to do with apathy toward the character. If they're not serving their purpose of getting hype to funneling hype towards, in this case, Street Fighter, and getting people to play or come back or start for the first time, that's where it doesn't really work for me. And those are the kinds of characters that I think go on this list. So I'll start with the most obvious one because I think there's one character beyond others that did not make a splash when they were first introduced, really, and they really haven't made much of a splash since, and that's Falk. Falk, when she was first revealed, it's like there was intrigue as to like what she's gonna be, and she looks a little bit different. She's got her bow staff, she's got really long reach. She was gonna be a zoner in a game where zoning really didn't work all that much, so there was some intrigue there and such. But I remember the takeaways from when her trailer dropped. I remember seeing it for the first time, looking at some comments. It was that people felt like she looked kind of janky. They weren't hyped for her. They were just they were immediately pointing to issues that they had. And then she comes out and she's widely regarded as a low tier character. Never really escaped that. And there have been moments in time where people have entertained the idea that she's going to be better, or that the game updates and she's got a whole list of buffs and she's going to be really good. But in terms of competitive play, I think we saw Oil King bring her out like twice to not that much effect. And she's super unpopular in CFN. She's often in the bottom 3, bottom 4, and in terms of the monthly update statistics that they roll out. Falk has not been a reason for people to pick up Street Fighter V. She's not been a reason for them to continue playing it. As far as I can tell, I mean, she's got a decent, visual design. She's got some good costumes, I think. But really, when you're asking people to pay extra money for some content, or grind out extra time and use their fight money and such, you're asking more of them to get this content. She really hasn't checked that box.
Yeah, Justin Wong, I will shout him out for also playing Falcon Tournament and doing some things, but it's like you and I are struggling to name anyone who's played this character, and to me, the biggest dud in the game. Really disappointing, and this is a lesson for all the people who are introducing new IP, new characters into fighting games. You need to do a lot to really make those characters kind of pop, and that's a very important part of the process. So, and Falk just kind of came out with a lot of meh. Like, I don't really care, and so just really a big failure kind of all around, I think, is what I kind of look at for Falk.
Yeah, and I will say shout outs to my buddy Rambro here. He's up in Phoenix where they eat boogers, but he is a pretty good player, and he has leveled up and won Wednesday night fights with Falk not too long ago, a few months back. I haven't played him in a long time since the pandemic started, so it'd be interesting to see that. So there have been some success cases with her, but really on the whole, not a lot going on with Falk. Something else I want to mention here. Falk's a brand new character to the franchise, so there aren't expectations that come with her. That's both a blessing and a curse. It's a double-edged sword. Then the other type of character, of course, would be a returning character, and they will have expectations because they will already have fan base. They will already have momentum, and that factors into all of this because, again, it's about how much hype a character is going to bring. If it's a brand new character, you're starting from square one. If it's not, you're starting from somewhere else down the line, and that changes the calculus a little bit. The next character I want to talk about is a returning character. I'm not sure, outside of Falk being the absolute worst, that's for sure as far as I'm concerned. The rest of these characters, I don't know to the varying degrees as to, how bad they are, but I think just hashing out the details and letting people kind of choose from there is I'm completely content with. So the next character is a returning character, and the expectations for a returning character in terms of effective DLC are naturally higher. And especially when it's a character like Sagat, who has been around in the Street Fighter franchise since day one, the original fighting game boss, so to speak. And he's got such a presence, so much potential momentum that the expectations are higher for him. And when you've got this new character coming in and everyone's excited to play him, everyone's excited to see what Bonchan does with them. There have been little splashes here and there, but the big takeaway and the big feeling about Sagat has widely been that it's not fun to just sit back and throw tiger shots. It's not fun to try to play his basic game. It's a grind that tends to be in not in your favor. The game has not really benefited his style ever, and he hasn't really been good enough to make it happen. There have been some success cases with him, some people that have really put the time in, and I think that's because the character has so much oomph behind him. But as far as his manifestation here in SF5, it hasn't been something fun and empowering as much as it has been a grind and a frustration. And so this character that could be, it was like Sagat was already a home run just because of who he was, but it could have easily been a grand slam and should have been a grand slam. And instead, he's just been more of a point of frustration that people want to like, but haven't really been able to fully embrace. And that may have changed here in season 5. He's gotten better, and maybe with V shift and such, the calculus has changed a bit, but we still haven't seen him become a reason for people to be really like surging in hype and playing the game.
Yeah, and one of the things about Sagat, like unlike some of the other characters, is it's clear there's a number of high level players that are putting in time into him, and they're just not getting a lot of results back out. They're getting some, but like comparatively, there's some underexplored characters in this game, and Sagat's not one of them in my opinion. He's decently well explored, and just people can't get the juice isn't worth the squeeze, as they say. And in Sagat's case, I don't know if it is.
Yeah. And again, this is different expectations. Sagat has had a bigger hype splash, if you will, than other DLC characters, but that the expectation of him to have a huge one and the potential for how much this character could have been versus what he actually came to be in fruition, that gap there is a reason why I feel like he's a failure. Not because he's necessarily bringing the least amount of hype, but because he's one of the biggest missed opportunities. The next character falls into this same exact category, and I dare say, even though Sagat has a bigger legacy, the potential here was even greater, and that, of course, is for Jury. She's a relatively new character in the Street Fighter franchise. She popped up in Street Fighter 4 back in Super, so that's somewhere around 2010. She's only been around for 11 years or so, and yet she is, as we've said before, one of the absolute biggest fan favorites across the board. You look up fan art, you're going to see Morgan, Chun-Li, Cammy, and you'll see Jury. And like every time you'll see Jury and multiple images of Jury. People love to talk about her. People were so hyped. She's got so much personality, and yet she's been this kind of lukewarm character that has not been strong enough, or at least perceived to be strong enough, and that's part of the equation here. It's the character, or the audience's perception of what they can do potentially with a character that's going to get a lot of them to play or not play. And Jury has had a decent amount of attention despite this idea, but again, where she should have been a matter of fact grand slam. This character could have been so much more than she is in terms of people playing her, in terms of her driving hype, excitement, goodwill towards Street Fighter V. And instead, every time she's brought up, well, almost every time she's brought up, it's with this negative lens of she's not good enough, she doesn't have the tools that she needs. And then those of us on the other side, it's like I lose to juries all the time, and maybe she's a natural sort of counter to my character. Maybe she does what my character wants to do better, and so I have a particularly rough time. But I'm not going, every time I see jury, oh, at least it's a free win. At least there's been not a lot of positivity on either side around her, and so there's still a love for her, like the foundational fan appreciation that she is the waifu, she is the character someone can identify with, whatever it is. There's still a lot of momentum there, but it still feels squandered, relatively speaking, because it could have been so much more with better execution of the character in general.
One of the biggest disappointments I had with Capcom with Jury is that it was like season 3 and they nerfed her inexplicably. And it was like Infiltration had like, won a tournament with her as like a sub or something like that. And they're like,
combo
okay,
breaker or something, but that was like,
yeah. And then they're like, let's nerf her. And it's like, what? Like, you have a character who's not even that good, and you have some real problem characters who we've documented super well in the podcast here. And it's like, you hit Jury? What? Like, that is, I don't want to say inexcusable, because maybe Capcom has got someone behind the scenes who's really good with the character or something like that. But like, it's a mind bender for me in terms of like why that would happen, and not having a very good explanation behind it either. When you have characters like Kami, Akuma, Rashid back then who clearly needed nerfs, and you hit Jury, that it's just like, it's one of those like, okay, fighting game developers, like, that's called being really out of touch. And that should probably never happen without an extremely good explanation backing it. It's like when they nerfed Phoenix Wright in Ultimate Marvel 3. Like, if for something, like, they felt like he was too cheap, but it's like no one was playing the damn character. And you gotta give people a chance to actually explore these characters, especially when they're DLC. And let them kind of like, let them spread their wings a little bit. Let them have at least a little bit of time in the sun. Maybe it's too good, and you find out long term it's too good, but at least give them that chance before you just knock them down into oblivion. And that's, I don't want to say Jury's in oblivion, because both you and I play against some really good Jury players, but to go back to your statement there, I really think that's much more the players than the character. If those same people had put time into Cammy or something like that, I think they'd be a lot further along.
Yeah.
And so, I agree with you, Jury's not a free win, but it's also like, she's just too underwhelming for what she should be.
Apparently people aren't having that much fun playing her, and they still want to play her, but I think that comes from the momentum from before Street Fighter V. And if that's the case, it's like you've got all of that, and this is the result, given that that's how much was put into it. You're coming into things, again, it's just too big of a gap between what should have been and what actually manifests. And so I think it's more of a missed opportunity. There are much less popular characters, and one of which that didn't make this list, but you could argue that he's very much not popular, is someone like Blanca. Blanca is one of the less played characters, but Blanca kind of exists in like a different sort of capacity when it comes to DLC, when it comes to hype for this game. When Blanca came out, we were all going, oh, all right. He's not a character as much as others that is supposed to be on the character select screen for people to choose, as much as he's there for the sake of the joke, for the sake of the personality of the game, that you have this sort of trolley online type of character that has these trolley online tactics, that has a costume like Blanca-chan. That was a huge splash. That got a lot of attention, when he first came out. So there was, I think Blanca, and you could probably say in a similar sense, Dan, served purposes, and they were effective DLC if for different kinds of reasons. But when you have a character like Jury, the reason you want her is because you're going to get a lot of people that want to play her, a lot of people that want to download her, that might jump into the game just for the sake of Jury. And when she's as underwhelming as she's been in the public eye, and they haven't been able to shift the discussion to being that she's actually fun and enticing, and yeah, come on in, the water's great, that's a failure in my eyes. The next one up here is the one that I feel the most lukewarm about, and that's why he reached this. I don't have anything amazing to say, nothing that really stands out about him, and that might be part of the reason why I see him as one of the kind of bigger failures of DLC here, but that is Cody. I think that they're similar to Jury. There was an expectation. He didn't really hit it, not to the same degree or the same deficit as Jury or Sagat, but he's always been so just lukewarm. And I think of Cody and I go, I'm not excited, I'm not mad, I'm not anything. And I feel like kind of the most apathy about this character. I don't know if that's just me or not, but you certainly don't see him pop up too much in competition. He's relatively uncommon, not the most, but relatively uncommon when you're playing online. And for what he could have been, he's been around for a long time. He's a legacy character from the Final Fight series. He's had a few Street Fighter appearances. He's got a lot of cool swag to him. There was a lot of momentum going into it with like, oh, he's the mayor now and Kenny Omega's doing, and people were excited to see him. He came out, and then I like never heard anything about Cody after that. Every once in a while, like Shazzy, or I haven't even seen Shazzy play in a while. It's, you got other people like Hoji playing, and it's just some side thing online, or it's someone made top 8 in an online event, but nothing going with Cody. And he's so cool, but he's not in this game.
It's Cody's like in the legacy of Street Fighter is like one of the most powerful characters. It's
Yep.
like, him, Akuma, like I think Gin is up there, Oro and a few others. And it's like, this is one of the characters you probably can't do this to. Like I think that story wise is really cool. He's a mayor, they did him a brand new look. I think his new look is great. I think a lot of the stuff works for him. I just think like his gameplay has been too mediocre, and he's kind of one of those characters you don't want to be where he's at right now. You kind of look at him as a I don't want to say a big failure, but maybe that's not unfair, because I know a lot of people who are big fans of Cody and they just don't like him at all, and that's kind of like with a popular character like him, that's kind of like what you don't want to do. And so like I rarely advocate for a character who plays like Cody does to be just kind of like unnaturally buffed, but he's kind of like one of those characters where it's like he's not Ryu, but he's also like, you don't want to disappoint the fans of Cody by making him like what he is right now. So he falls too flat. So
Boring the crap out of me. And there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of fear of this idea of making characters pay to win, right? And that's something that's popped up in the Mortal Kombat arena. That's something that's popped up in the Dragon Ball Fighters arena, that the new characters that come out are so good, and that's because the obvious incentives that you want people to buy them and such. And I think that there's room for some of that, especially if you're regularly updating your games. And it makes people want to both play them and know how to fight them, which is nice because you're going to see them more often and you're going to have a reason to take them into training mode. And you won't end up like running into them randomly in tournament when you have no idea what's going on. That's still on you, but hey, there's some incentive to explore that. And I really do think that there is a tactful approach of making characters maybe a little better than they will end up being, but erring on the side of strength so that people explore them, so that they can be this surge of hype in your game without completely compromising the competitive side of things. It takes tact. It takes a lot of attention and detail, but that's your job. And this is where we are here in 2021, DLC. Fighting games, like I expect that would be something that developers pay attention to and execute highly upon.
yeah, it's so much fun watching the same 10 characters dominate a game for 5 years in a row, because that's great entertainment. It's like I want to see that Rashid versus Rashid matchup for the millionth time.
Absolutely.
Boom, here it is. Capcom Cup. Boom. So thank you for that, Capcom.
I'm not sure how to go about this last pick. I actually have two characters, one of which I think is the bigger, stronger example in terms of how I'm analyzing, but I wanted to talk about both. And it's G and Manat, both of whom, and it's interesting, right? Because we'll start with this. Manat came out season 2, right? Anyway. Season 3?
Well, they changed all the freaking seasons around, so it's like all the seasons get blended together. But we know approximately when Manat and G came out, and there we go.
G was season 3, Manat was season 2. Yes. Anyways, Manat comes out. She made a huge splash, and she made a huge splash competitively speaking. We saw a ton of Manat players. She had this interesting new approach to the game with her, especially with her V-Trigger 1. She was a zoner that could zone. There was reason to talk about Manat. There was reason to watch footage of Manat matches, both in competition and just to do research. We were running into her a little bit, but as I went back and looked at the Capcom Fighters Network stats, she's never been a popular character. And as you've said a million times, she's very technical. She's not easy to play. Fair enough. She came out as a very hot star in terms of the competitive side of things, and she was also everybody's waifu day one. There was a lot of hype about her as a character and design. She's attractive, she's this and that, she's a waifu. I think that she came out as a success, no questions asked. But as soon as they nerfed her, she became a shell of what she was, and people very clearly did not want to put in the time. And as I went through, you can go on CFN on their on the Capcom Shadaloo page, and you can look at character popularity every single month since the game came out. And Minot has almost never been outside of the top of the bottom three most popular
Yeah.
characters. Sometimes she's number four. When she came out, she was like 12th in popularity. She was 29th the month after, and she's been hovering in bottom three ever since. And that's through the time where she was doing well in competition, and it's up until now. And I got to think, you know, I felt like Minot was the next jury in terms of she comes out, everyone's really excited about her, talking about her, drawing her, apparently playing her, but evidently not so much. And then now she's not there. She doesn't have that competitive presence. And I mean, sure, maybe she's waifu a little bit, but hey, Rose is out, and you know, people like you that were fans of Rose that were fans of Minot because of her proximity. Well, now you got Rose, and she's really taken a back seat. And so it almost feels like that initial hype was kind of either artificial or it was so fleeting that she's ultimately become a failure despite that hot start. But I really wanted to ask you
I
about it because you've been a
yeah, I
Minot
have
main, and yeah.
a lot of rebuttals to this one, but also you've got good points too. Minot came at a time when everyone was saying Street Fighter V was a brain dead easy game to play. And so she was kind of Capcom's answer to that in a lot of ways because, like, okay, you think this game is easy? Well, here's one of the most technical characters we've ever designed. I don't know if she's the most technical Capcom character ever, but she's up there at the least. Even playing Rose, Rose is really hard to play in this game. Still, Minot is a step above her. Minot is ridiculous. And so that was kind of like Capcom's way of saying, okay, community, like if you want to play a technical game, here she is. Then the other thing is Infiltration had, his whole situation and stuff happen. He was one of the best Minot players, and he was one of the big reasons how come she made such a big splash, him and Sako. Sako, of course, experiments with a lot of characters, always has, probably always will. If Infiltration didn't, have that time away, basically, I think Minot would be much higher up on people's radars because he'd be winning a bunch of tournaments. And Minot is a character who really fits that kind of keep away, slippery style that he plays a lot. So there's a good bit there, but overall, it's kind of like she's a double-edged sword, I think, of Street Fighter V's complaints, where the community is like, give us this, like we really want this, and then the reality is like, nah, I'm just gonna go play freaking Rashid. Like Rashid's like so much easier to play, or I'm gonna go play like Akuma or something like that, some other character who's much easier to play. We don't really want execution here. We just want to complain about it and have you address it, and then not use the character that addresses it.
Do you
So
think they'll bring her
it's
back
kind
in
of,
future Street Fighters? Is she the kind of character that would be
you
worth doing?
know, I actually on the EventHubs chat, I actually said that I didn't think Minot would come back, and they're like, well, look at all the fan art, look at all the cosplay, look at all the other kind of stuff. Like, there's a really good case for her from a popularity standpoint to bring her back, and I think you could simplify and probably should simplify the character a bit from what she is here in Street Fighter V, and you're better off for it because I mean, again, I played the character for 3 freaking years, and even then I was still struggling to do some of the stuff that like. She's so hard to play. So it's an interesting case. I don't necessarily fully agree, nor do I fully disagree.
Well, that's where I'm at
it's
too.
kind of yeah, it's a really interesting spot with her. She's a compelling entry for this.
Oh, and let me correct something. I said that she was top 12. She was top 6 the month after her release. That was when she was most popular. And then she went to the bottom 3 the month after that. And usually a character hits pretty high, top 10, sometimes top 3 or so, and then, slowly wanes. She immediately went down to bottom 3, often below Falk, and has been there ever since. So just something to observe about her. And I'm not certain that she's a failure through and through, but man, those are not very good marks. But the other character I wanted to talk about was G.
Minot's one people think that they should know is Minot's last name that they never talk about it is training mode. Monat training mode. That's her name because you just spend the next 4 or 5 months of your life in training mode with her if you want to play her. So
Oh, I thought it
that's
was
like I'm
gonna
going to talk
play her,
about.
just not gonna play her. So, uh,
That's much better. There you go.
last one here is last one here is G, and I guess these guys are kind of fighting for this final spot if it's a top five. But G came out. He wasn't immediately hyped, but he had a decent amount of hype around him. He started to gain momentum when people figured out his V trigger stuff, which is a few months after release, and then he was a real hot character that you'd see. Everyone had like a pocket G, but it wasn't a good hot character. It was a frustrating, this is what's most wrong with the game right now, robbery, undeserved feelings. But it did drive a lot of people to want to play him. And I would say that's an example of a character coming out and being too strong, inappropriately balanced in a way that is attractive to play him, but it's not attractive for everybody else that's on the playground with him. And that's a problem. So, but that happened. And it was kind of that way for a couple of years, and then Capcom nerfed him a little bit, changed that around for season 5, and hot damn has he fallen off. I don't think he doesn't really reach the he doesn't have like 2% of the character of the player base playing him. He's always sub 2% nowadays. And really he just feels like he was played because he was OP, but as soon as he wasn't, there was almost nothing left to the character. And then he's still good, but he's not as easy to win with as he used to be. And again, it feels like evidence that people were just playing him because he was kind of an easy win, or he could kind of cheat around a little bit and steal stuff away, and that was fun for the player, not for the other player. And so that combination, it's like, I don't know how much lasting staying power that's going to have. And really, when he was doing well, as much as he was getting hype, he was also making people frustrated. And to me, that's not a good combination. That's ultimately not a good final score for a DLC character if you want people jumping in and playing your game.
Yeah, this is a character I disagree with you the most on. I actually think G has been pretty darn good. I loved his intro at Evo with the voice actor that came out there. They had all the player cards that Capcom did. I think G is actually a really good example of how you launch a brand new character. He's based on Q, who we know is like very popular within the franchise. Like I think G has actually been one of the bigger characters, and there's some stuff I'd like to see done with him still, but he's still popular in the circles I run in. Like I run across a G player fairly often now. I'm in California, and that's kind of like G country, right? Like the West Coast is kind of like where you see a lot of your G's at. So it depends, but anyway, yeah, didn't intend for that one, but there it is. Anyway, I'm gonna roll with it. But I mean, I love his design. I think he's really well done. The robbery stuff, you and I really advocated against, like knocking him down, but I think he needed that initial run to get traction and to compete with the idiots of the Street Fighter realm, like the Balrogs and the Bisons and other stuff. Like he kind of needed that to stand out from the crowd, and I think there's enough people still playing him in this day and age that he's a justified character. So that's the one I disagree with you the most on. I actually like G quite a bit. So
Like a G quite a bit. As not a G player, that's crazy for me to hear, but I believe you. Yeah, most recently.
and he's robbery too, and you know how I feel about robbery characters, but he makes a lot of sense. But I'll keep in mind I played against G a lot because Dream King played him for about a year and a half, so I got very familiar with a lot of setups and other things. And he's pretty tricky to counter, but he's also tricky to play. So it feels more earned with him than it does a lot of the other robbery characters. You yourself, you even played a little bit of G, and you saw that to do his advanced stuff, he's reasonably technical for robbery, especially in this game. So.
Eh.